up, everyone. Welcome to the Hermit's Cave. Lovely to see so many people here already. We already have 41 people waiting, which I think is a record before we even hit the live button. But as you can see, tonight is something a little bit different, something very special. It's a Cup of Cashman Cards special. I'll just do a collective hello, otherwise going through everybody in the chat, which I usually do, would take up quite a bit of time. So hello and welcome. So tonight's topic is the soul of tarot. And it's some people who I consider friends, but also great minds within the tarot online community, responding to 10 thought-provoking questions. And I think it'd be really nice if we all introduce ourselves. So I would imagine everybody in the chat knows everyone anyway, but if we just go around, as hopefully it's in the same configuration as I've got it. But Elaine, you're next to me this way.
Okay, hello. I'm Elaine from Tarot, Tatts Tea. I've been involved in tarot for a number of years, but very, very deeply for the last 10. And I'm here because I had a lot of influence from the lovely people that you see on the screen with me tonight. So I've got a lot to say thank you to them for getting me where I am, especially online and on Tarot Tube. So thank you guys, and hello everybody else.
It's lovely to have you with us, Elaine. And when was it you started your channel now? It was pre-COVID, wasn't it?
It was, yes. I've had the channel now, I would say I've had the actual channel started off as a school channel in 2004, but I took it over when I retired. I adopted it as my own, so I've had the channel active as Tarot, Tatts Tea for about 8 years now. Yeah, wow. It's flown in. Yeah.
Wow, 8 years.
Flown.
Well, thank you for being here tonight and agreeing to join us, Elaine. Chris.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris. My pronouns are he, him. I've got a channel called Elemental Cartomancy. My big passion is for reading the cards. I love all things reading, so I'm often doing readings on my channel, whether it's readings for people or collective readings and things like that. I've been a bit off the radar recently because I kind of started a new role within my job at the start of the year, so that's been taking up a lot of my headspace, but I'm still here, still watching in the background, in the wings, and yeah, I'm really excited to be here tonight.
It's lovely to have you with us. And again, Chris, I mean, we've collaborated together many times over the years, haven't we? So Throwback Thursdays, the Boxing Day bashers, and I think you even assisted me during quarantine streams. I think that's when we first started doing collaborations.
The quarantine.
Quarantine streaming, you was kind of helped me out when I couldn't do them. So that was quite a commitment, doing one every day, alive every day. But so, and when did you start your channel? Was it probably around 6 years?
August 2020, I think.
Okay.
I started it when Jen did a tag. My very first video was a response to Jen's Balanced Tarot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was August 2020 that I started.
Wow. But I think you was around a lot longer as well, weren't you? You appeared in other people's lives.
Oh yeah. I've kind of been around since I've been on and off the tarot scene ever since, like, just about the time you started your channel, to be fair, Simon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always been kind of. In fact, I found Tarot Tube. I've said this before, but I found Tarot Tube through Kelly Bear because I was looking for videos on a certain tarot deck, and Kelly Bear had posted this hilarious, really scathing review of the tarot deck. And
which deck was that?
Funny you say that because it was the Witch's Tarot.
I have a very interesting story about that to tell you afterwards. I'll let you know.
Oh, we want to know. Yeah, and likewise, Chris. Thanks for agreeing to come on tonight. And then Kelly, you're next, and I think you're the oldest channel amongst everybody present, aren't you?
Maybe only by a year over yours. I started 9 years ago month, my anniversary. Oh, what was that sound? I just heard a loud sound. Yeah, I've been around on TarotTube watching and lurking since about 2012, 2013. Started a channel in January 2016. I've been interested in the tarot. Got my first deck probably around 96, 97. And been studying and reading it on and off over that time, but like solidly since about 2012. And yeah, I like all sorts of divination and witchery and arts and crafts. Yeah, and I just enjoy being here on TarotTube. So thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome. And was it Osho Zen, that first tarot deck?
Yeah, it was. That was my very first.
Yeah. Oh, before I forget, I don't know if you've heard or not, but Creatures at the Magical Forest being reissued, borderless.
Shut up! Are you kidding me? How long have I been asking for that?
I know. So Cheryl told me the other night that every deck that had the multiple languages on are being re-released borderless.
Oh my God, I'm
thought
so
you'll be
excited.
pleased.
Thank you for letting me know. That's all. I'm gonna have to get a backup copy. Thank you.
And then last but by no means least, we've got Robin. How are you doing, Robin?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I have a channel called Toadstool Tarot. It's been about 5 or 6 years now. I kind of twisted Simon's arm to be my mentor. And I'm just sort of a spit away across the pond from the rest of you guys in New York City. And I do, the last 4 months or so, I've been doing a weekly live on Saturdays, just 2 hours before this. So tune in, if you will, and help me, because I've been stuck in 1.9K subscribers for about a year and a half, and I'm trying to bump over that 2,000 mark. So please help me out. One last thing, I also have a radio show Monday nights, an internet radio show. It has nothing to do with tarot, but it covers, I sort of hopscotch over 10 decades of music. And it's one on luxuriamusic.com. It's from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern time, but within a half hour after the live airing, it goes into their podcast, so you can listen to it anytime. So
brilliant.
Please join me.
Smashing.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and you feel like a channel that's been around for forever. I think I didn't have a channel long when I first noticed you come onto the scene, but that was certainly pre-COVID as well, wasn't it? When you first appeared. So thank you everyone for joining me. So the way that we're going to do this tonight is, and you will have seen from people's introductions here, that this panel, I think, will have very unique, well, that's a tautology, isn't it? Very unique. We'll have unique perspectives about tarot and tarot practices, tarot ethics, the kind of evolution of tarot, etc. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to have people who I thought would perhaps see things from a different perspective, perhaps from my own even as well. So I think there's a really good mix here tonight. But also, I really would like this to be very interactive as well. So if you're obviously in the chat, almost 100 people are in the chat, do join in as well. Answer the questions. Let us know your thoughts, because the questions that I've put together, I've put in the description that they're thought-provoking, but they're thought-provoking certainly for me, because I sometimes, when I've looked at the questions, I might answer them differently depending on where I am at any fixed point in time. So I know there's a couple of questions here. Had you asked me perhaps as little as 2 years ago, I would have answered it completely differently to how I would answer it now. So the way that I'm going to do it is, and we had a little discussion before, come on, I'll pose a question and then we'll just ask if somebody wants to start us off, and then as we go, get it more into the flow, I'll perhaps throw a random question at somebody and answer it if you're comfortable answering it. If you don't want to answer it or you want some more time to think about it, we can then ask somebody else if they want to jump in. So, and hello to everybody else who's just come in, because I've just noticed quite a spike in the last few minutes while I was doing the introductions as well. So I did a collective hello at the beginning. So are we ready, everyone?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
as ready as we can be.
Question number 1 is around the ethics of tarot, but in particularly tarot reading. So the question is, should tarot readers always tell the truth, even if it's difficult to hear? Anybody want to take that one first?
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah. Do you want me to take
you,
that
you,
one?
you do a lot of professional tarot readings as well, don't you, Elaine? It's something you do on a regular basis.
It is, yeah. I would like, I think we should always tell the truth, but because if we don't, we're sort of devaluing tarot. You know, if there's a message there, it's meant to be given, but it's how we put that message forward. You know, there could be something that somebody needs a heads up about something, and it could be it just the manner in the way you pass the message on is what could sort of lessen a blow, so to speak, and almost turn what could be deemed as a darker or negative side to a reading, you know, sort of turning it into a positive, you know, that it's a learning curve, that things won't always be like this, etc., etc. You know, that life is always full of ups and downs, and we've got to take both, otherwise it'd be pretty boring. I think if we go down the route of not telling the truth, then we're sort of in danger of making our tarot readings, why people will pay for a tarot reading, sort of we're lessening it, if you know what I mean. We're undermining it almost, because I don't believe that a card would come out unless it's supposed to be read. You know, and if you know, if that's the case, then I do believe we'd be fooling our querent, but we'd also be undermining ourselves as tarot readers if we weren't to pass on what's been out in the reading.
Yeah, and could I just clarify as well, because you know, when you said depends on sort of what the message is,
Yes.
where would you draw the line, if there is a line, between the message being guidance
Mm-hmm.
and the message being prediction? You know, because I think sometimes when we're talking about being truthful and, you know, there's a message to give, is that
Yes.
because this is a prediction that we see happening, or do we then kind of, I don't want to use the word sugarcoat, but, you know, kind of soften it with, actually, this is guidance? Do you see a line there? Or
What I do when somebody comes to me for a reading, before I even shuffle the cards, I ask them, A, have they had a tarot reading before? I also ask, what do they understand from tarot? You know, what do they see it as? The minute somebody says to me fortune telling or that sort of, I have to stop them there and then. And I say, well, I use tarot as a form of guidance. What can be seen as past, present, and future. This is what can happen depending on the choices you make, because everybody has free will. A deck of cards, a deck of tarot cards, can advise us, can show us the possible way, but it's down to how we take that information, what paths we choose to take, because at the end of the day, we're all masters of our own destiny. You know.
brilliant. Thank you, Elaine. Should
No.
we just work round? Chris, do you want to take that one next?
Sure. I think Elaine said it really well. I guess the only thing that I can think to add right now is I think it depends on what the truth is that you're seeing. Is this your truth, something that you're seeing, or is this the truth? I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I think it comes into that kind of what you're talking about, whether it's prediction or whether it's. But if, for example, I'm seeing a truth that, you know, it's just a truth because I think I'm seeing it, and it's like it's going to be defamatory, or it's going to accuse somebody of something. So if I'm reading for somebody and I think I see like your husband's cheating on you, just to pluck an example out there, I might think that that's the truth because that's what I'm seeing. Is it appropriate for me to turn around and say that? I really don't think so. I'm not going to turn around and accuse somebody of something on the turn of a card. So, yeah, obviously, I think it's important to tell the truth, but I think you've got to be careful how you deliver that truth and think about what the truth is that you're telling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Brilliant. Kelly?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I was next in order. I was waiting for Robin. Yeah, that's really interesting what both of you said. I agree. I also think, for clarification, I'm not a professional reader. I've never read professionally. I'm very enthusiastic amateur, long-time amateur. I used to say I'd never read professionally, but now I learn never to say never, so we never know. But as well as being readers of cards, we are also readers of people, and I don't mean that in the sense of cold reading. I just mean as human beings to human beings. I think it's important that we're able to pick up on what someone's putting down with regards to their body language, whether they seem closed off and cagey, whether they seem open and receptive to possibly receiving information that might not be all like rainbows and lollipops, and just being tactful, learning to be tactful in delivering information. And that was really interesting, the point that Chris made about someone potentially having a spouse that's cheating on them, and do you get to say that, because is that your truth, or is it? But I think it's sort of going back to what Elaine's saying, which is, this is what I see, bear in mind such and such and such. I do also think that it's important to clarify, there's so many different ways of reading. There's like psycho-spiritual and like self-help. We then have, I think there's a difference between fortune telling and fate telling, maybe. And I think we're seeing a resurgence in the fortune telling side of tarot, which has been sort of, it's a bit like how witchcraft was defanged, and it was like, oh, it's Wicca and it's fluffy and it's bunnies and we don't worship the devil. And now those of us that practice like folk magic and are just going, no, some of us do like work with demons and do pacts with spirits and like enjoy working with the devil and what have you. There's this like reclamation, rewilding and refanging of witchcraft now that it's become safe, at least in some countries. And I think that's happening with divination and tarot, especially that fortune telling aspect that was sort of tamped down because it was practiced mostly by marginalized groups, and then sort of the enlightened people and the Hermetic Dawn came in and were like, oh no, we don't do any of that. So I just wanted to say, like, I enjoy that that's coming back, and I think there is a place for it, but I think that is different. Because, sorry, long story short, I think that's different to fate telling, because if you can say, this is what I see up ahead, fortune telling, if you continue on this path, which is kind of what we do anyway, right? As opposed to fate telling, which is like, this is definitely going to happen, which there's so many variables involved, and you know, as soon as something becomes observed according to physics, it will change. So I think that's always in the cards, as it were, that things can change. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
No, it wasn't. No, that was brilliant.
Apologies. Sorry, Robin, I'll let you...
I'll come back to a bit after Robin, because you kind of hit something that I was going to say as well, which...
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, that's brilliant.
Oh, okay.
Robin?
Okay, well, I haven't been reading that long, and I'm still learning. We're all learning, right? Usually what I do, though, is I say right up front that I don't do predictive readings, because most people want a predictive reading. They want the treasure answered, dropped in their lap, basically, most of the time. And I don't do that. I kind of look at tarot, well, like Elaine, as a guidance system. Also, I think you can be as truthful as what you see in the cards. You have to keep an eye on your biases, but try to be as honest as you can in terms of what you're looking at. And for me, I don't even know whether to call myself a reader. I think maybe I'm more an image interpreter, because I look at what's happening in the cards and what's going on, and I treat tarot as a kind of a book of cautions. So I think anything really, no matter how negative it might seem, can be delivered with, a sense of humility and diplomacy. I mean, you don't come out and say, girl, you're in danger, you're going to die. You never put it that way. You have to figure out a way to present the energy and what you're seeing that gives somebody a way to move forward rather than stopping them dead in their tracks. I think that about covers what I wanted to say.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, and
hissing. I don't know about you guys.
I'm getting a very loud hissing, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think what might be an idea is if we all put our mics onto mute, and then as we go around on mic, and then we might get some. That's it. So that helps. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I guess the downside of doing this is that I'm trying to remember what everybody said, because there's everything everybody said I kind of nod and agree with. But for me, a few key points there that I would pick up on is absolutely it's your interpretation. When we do a reading with someone, and I always say with someone rather than for someone, particularly if it's face to face, because it's you, the cards, and the other person, and you've got that triangulation. It's about what I'm seeing in the cards, and then trying to get that validation from them. Do you see that too? Is that making sense? So it's bringing them along with you as you're reading. But the point that I was going to pick up with what Kelly said, which I really agree with, is that sort of everything. I see life as a blueprint. Okay, I don't believe in fate in as much as everything is predetermined, and no matter what we do in life, A will always take us to Z. That's the course. I believe for every action there's a reaction, and similarly, there's that's the essence of cause and effect. So I think every decision we make will take us on a different journey, and I think we've all reflected in our lives and think, do you know what, would I be here now if I had done that back then? And so we can see how our life is mapped out. Now some will say, well, that's still predetermined. I don't believe that. So I'm cautious about, yes, it's really important to tell the truth of what you're picking up in the reading, but to also, help bring them along with you with that. But also, this is guidance. This is, if you are continuing on your current trajectory, then this is potentially, what's coming up. However, the beauty of tarot is it gives us foresight. So it helps us to make decisions and choices to change the course. So if we see like the Tower card coming up in a fixed period of time, the first thing we do is, oh no, the Tower card. But actually for me, that's a warning. And therefore, I can make certain choices to put my life into a different direction. So that's kind of how I would answer that one. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you to everybody in the comments. I did try and put a few up, but obviously when I'm talking, I have to keep focus. So, but everybody that's in the chat, we'll see everybody's comments anyway. So the second question then, how are we doing for time? So yeah, I don't know if we'll get through all 10 tonight, but we will see how we go. The second question is around the intuition versus traditional meanings. And I've kind of done it as a two-part question. So if you need me to repeat any parts of it, I'm happy to. But the question is, how much should a reader rely on intuition versus learned meanings? And therefore, the second part is, can a reading be accurate if it ignores traditional interpretations? Because I often hear about, well, I've never studied a book, I just purely on intuition. I've had a reading at a fair I've been to before where it was purely on intuition. They used an RWS deck, and all the way through I was squirming thinking, that's not what the 6 of coins means, which I shouldn't do. That's not what I was there for. So how much should a reader rely on intuition versus learned meanings? And can a reading be accurate if it ignores traditional interpretations? Robin, do you want to start us off with that one this time?
Sure. What's funny, because I think you need a background in tarot. You need to know, you need a sort of a common language or a starting point. So you do need some basis in what the tarot is about. But I guess it depends on how you use it. And I like to have a dialogue with people. I'm not a therapist, but I guess I sort of do treat it like a therapeutic dialogue, because most people, I think, just kind of want compassion and understanding and support. And so they want to be heard and they want help over a difficult issue. And I tend so much not to provide answers as to offer questions. So I'll look at the cards and say, well, I see this. Could it be this? Or how do you feel about this? And I try not to let my biases go in, but I do welcome more information from the person I'm dealing with. And the more information I get, the easier it seems to read the images, or synchronicities kind of pop into place. But I do have to be ever watchful that I'm not letting my biases fall in there. So instead of like pushing answers or my ideas on them, I'm usually trying to like have them face questions to ask themselves, to have them confront their own issues, and kind of using the images and the cards as a tool to bring up these questions like, have you considered this? Or does this ring true? How would you proceed given these two options? So I'm not really like predicting or throwing the answers at them. I'm trying to draw out of them, here, let me take your hand and help you find your own way, kind of thing.
Okay. Shall we continue going round clockwise and get to Kelly?
It's throwing me off. I have very strong feelings about this, and I've spoken about this on my channel before. Hang on. The question was, there was two parts to it. What was it?
Yeah. So how much should a reader rely on intuition versus learned meanings, and can a reading be accurate if it ignores it?
Okay. So for me, if I'm going to a professional reader, and this is very divisive because your mileage may vary, I want the reader that I'm going to have studied the tarot. As long as you've studied the tarot, if you're then going off intuitive hits, I'm cool with that, right? But I am not into paying someone for a tarot reading and they're just going off vibes, right? You're asking someone for money. And I feel like sometimes, especially with, the TikTok, Gen Z kind of like, no attention span, everything's quick, reels, shorts. I feel like there's almost an aversion to putting in the work and doing the graft of like learning fucking meanings, hammering them into your skull, and of course then going off that. No one's saying these are the meanings, because depending on what book or deck you pick up, it's going to be different. There's a general kind of consensus that we kind of, and even then it's a little, depending if it's Thoth or Marseille or Smith-Waite or what have you, a deck doing its own thing. You're then going to come up with your own meanings, which is the point, right? You're learning the traditional meanings, traditional quote unquote traditional meanings. You're then going deeper by getting what you can from yourself, what you're getting from those cards, and studying those. And again, that takes time, that takes graft, that takes effort. Get yourself a journal. And then from there, you can then, that's part of the intuitive thing, right? Because you're sort of trying to pull out what's coming up for you from inside you or from spirit, or whatever you think is going on there. And then once you've practiced enough, you'll find that, that color's really jumping out to me. That symbol, that little, that will happen. And that's, I think, part of actually reading the tarot. Like, if that's not happening for you and you are just going off the meanings, that's also not good. Like, it's a combination of the two, but I want that person to have, put the work in, essentially. And I think a lot of people want to pick up a tarot deck, go off vibes, and like suddenly start earning money. Obviously not everyone, but I've seen it myself. I've seen it happen. If you're just reading for yourself, I mean, I just read for myself. If I want to pick up, well, it's too late now because I've done the work, but like if someone wants to pick up a tarot deck, and just read off vibes, knock yourself out. I mean, not literally, but like, go for it. And I think for those of us that first get decks, if we're younger, if we're teenagers or kids, that's often what we do. Like you talked about making stories up, Simon. You know what I mean? I've seen other people doing that. I think, Elaine, you said in your VR to Simon that you talked about making stories. I think that's natural. We're storytellers. As humans, we're storytellers. But that's coming off of looking at these archetypes, which are kind of universal-ish. And so you're picking something up from that, right? But yeah, I want to, if it's professional, and then again, obviously your mileage may vary, but that's where I put my stake in the ground, and I will end there.
Thanks, Kelly. Just to say as well, Tamara has asked if we can hashtag this because the people want to do VRs. Absolutely, I'll put a hashtag to it at the end because that'd be great to hear further kind of thoughts on these questions. And I was just going to say as well, yeah, completely agree with what Robin and Kelly said so far. There are decks that rely, not tarot decks, but there are decks like soul cards where you rely purely on intuitive hits. But that changes as well, again, depending on your life state and what you're seeing in the cards based on your life state. But yeah, I'll wait till the end to add any more. Chris?
So I might actually be a wee bit controversial here because I've got a slightly different viewpoint. For me, I've got to remember that this thing started as a game. And it was a game for hundreds of years before anybody thought to use it for fortune telling. So with that in mind, my view is that there is no one right way to read tarot. There's no one right meaning for the Six of Pentacles or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Whatever example you want to pick. And there was no meaning for it for hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden someone's come along and put a meaning on it, and that's been built on through time and whatnot. So I kind of there's a part of me that says, well, who am I to turn around and say, well, no, you're not reading that, that's not the way you should read that, do you know what I mean? Because you're not doing it the Smith-Waite way, or someone else might say because you're not reading that how you should, like with the way Thoth would, do you know what I mean? Like the way Thoth would, as though Thoth is a person, the way that you would if you were reading Thoth. So my two answers to that question kind of have come off of that. How much should a reader rely on intuition versus meaning? I kind of feel like there is no, I'm not really in a place to say what a reader should do, do you know what I mean? And can a reading still be accurate? Totally. I mean, there's lots and lots of readers that I've come across myself who are very intuitive readers, and they have been accurate. Rachel Pollack in 78 Degrees of Wisdom talks about readers that she'd come across who purely intuitive, no kind of didn't go off the books, the traditional meanings, and were fantastic readers. However, what I will say, if someone was to approach me and say, well, I want to start getting into tarot, right, so we're talking about intuition, right? That means inner tuition. It means inner knowledge, inner knowing. Your intuition is going to be much better if you have studied some kind of meanings. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't. I'm not just talking about the tarot meanings, like colors, chakras. Do you know what I mean? All of that stuff. The more that you study, the more information you take in, the more experience you have, the better, the more powerful and sharp a tool your intuition is going to be. So my advice to someone who would want to learn the tarot would probably be, just to be a complete hypocrite and go back on what I was just saying, my big soapbox I was on, would probably be to learn all the stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because to me, that is what builds your intuition and makes you a really good reader. But at the same time, this was a game for hundreds of years, and I don't think it's really for anyone to turn around and say, oh, you're doing that wrong because you're not reading it the way that I would read it.
I will just add in, because I forgot to answer the second half of the question, was can in purely intuitive reading be accurate? And I think it can be. It doesn't have to go by traditional meanings. And I think, Chris, there where you were saying when someone's like the Six of Swords doesn't mean that, or what have you, I think that's different. If you're just going off of there's a difference between reading what the meaning is and knowing what the traditional meaning is, but going with an intuitive hit anyway, and just going off vibes. I do think there's a difference to that, because there's been times where I've had a card come up and I'm like, it means this, but I'm getting this, so I'm going to go with that. But I think the important distinction for me is that I know generally what that means. And like, yeah, it was a game, which is amazing, because humans will use all sorts of random crap to like tell fortunes with. It's great. But also, like, say if you were of a tradition, like your Italian nonna is like reading with playing cards or what have you, there is still a system. And if she's going to teach you, like, I'm just saying, you'd like just an imaginary person, she's going to want you to learn the system, even though it might be like an intuitive, like it's passed down. I don't know. It's interesting though. I really liked what you said about there are readers who've just always gone off intuition, and they can be great, because it's also true. But I think for me, it's personally, I don't want to part money with someone who's not done. Yeah, I don't know. It's a personal thing of mine, I think.
No, you're right though, because money does make everything kind of a slightly awkward, doesn't it? It puts a different slant on everything when you think that people are charging money. It's like, oh, right, well, hang on a wee minute. You're totally right.
Yeah. Elaine?
To be honest with you, I agree with everything that's been said here. Kelly has exactly the same opinion that I would have said. I firmly believe that you have to have an understanding of the tarot. I believe anything that you're going to study, if we go away from tarot for a second, if you're going to study anything, you want to know its background. You want to know why you're studying it, what the reason is. Otherwise you could be, for all you know, you could have been, I don't know, kept in the dark and fed like a mushroom, kept in the dark and fed shit over something. And you think, hold on a second, all my life that's been wrong, and Chris, like you say, it started with a game, but it changed from being a game when the likes of Aleister Crowley, the likes of RWS, oh God, I've gone blank there. Arthur Edway, when they started putting meanings to it, it changed it. It took it from a game to being a divinatory tool. And Kelly was quite right where you say you can take all sorts of stuff and divine with it. Today, I use charms. I use Rory's story cubes, for God's sake, and you can do this sort of thing. I do think if you are charging people, I do charge for readings. I'm not going to not going to hide that. I would like the person to understand that I have studied tarot. I have studied its history. I've studied the meanings of the cards, and what I'm giving you here, this is the meaning of this particular card. However, I am getting this because you could be reading the person, you could be reading the symbols, you could be taking the numbers of the card, the astrology, the colors, everything about it has meaning. And so it you've got a combination there of the history, the traditional meanings. You've got your intuition, you've got symbolism, you've got numerology, you've got astrology. So you've got so much there that it just makes your readings all the more deeper and the more real. I think you have to have something of everything. I don't think it's a case of you can pick up a tarot deck and start just adding your own slant to the whole thing and changing it just because that's what you feel. It has to have some sort of link to a meaning. Otherwise, where does it come from? I know I do use intuition. I do use the historical meaning, but I use them to support each other. I don't know if that makes any sense. I sort of use that to give a holistic reading along with numerology and color, etc., etc. And I just feel that you have to learn your system. You have to know what you're doing. As Alia says there, learn your systems, definitely. And I agree. It started as a game, but it all changed when those people got hold of them and said, I'm going to make it mine.
Well, it became it was way before them. It was, I think one of the first we know about was Madame Lenormand, wasn't it? And they read for Napoleon and stuff. And so the point that I'm making is, what are the chances that the meanings that we use, the way that we interpret the cards, are going to be the same that she did? In fact, I think Vincent Petiti's done a really interesting thing where he compared like the little white books from like the 80s, the 60s, and they're vastly different. Do you know what I mean? Because we've changed vastly as a people.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what I mean? So there's no one way to tarot, surely.
There's no one way. That I agree. There's
yeah,
no one way.
that's for sure.
Taking everything and molding it to create a reading, to create meaning, as you say very rightly so, Chris, from its inception to where we are now, with society changing the way it has done over the decades, tarot has to change with times. What stood as a meaning in the early 1900s would not be relevant in today's world. So you have to sort of take the skeleton of that, have a look at it and say, well, this is what it meant then. The equivalent in my book is how equivalent would be X today, and how do we build on that? That's our foundation. And I think we have to have a foundation for anything on which we build,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you prefer intuitive readings, go with Marseille, because it's very fun for like just the flow. If you want to do open reading, that's the best bet.
Right.
The only thing I can add to this is trying to take on everybody's views. I mean, everybody knows that my preferred system is the RWS. So I get that, who's to say one person's interpretation would be different to another. However, the RWS in particular was Arthur Edward Waite dictating, stipulating, saying what his vision for the cards were, and then Pixie's interpretation of his what he wanted to get across in the cards was her artistic interpretation of that. Yes, there are discussions around how much license did she have to move away from that, and whether she had more control over the minors, etc. However, the point I'm making is this was a particular system that had meanings attributed to them, and an artist then interpreted those meanings. So for me, because that's my system, I think it's quite important that I have that base knowledge. And then what's already been mentioned here is, of course, I don't think there's a tarot reader out there who would just give you that interpretation as laid down in text. I think you look at those images, you think about the situation you're in, what the question that's being asked for you to interpret, and you add on, you overlay on your underpinning knowledge of what you've studied, and then you add your intuition on top of that. Can a tarot reading influence can a tarot be accurate if it ignores the traditional interpretations? Again, this is when I said right at the beginning, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I'd have probably said, no, I'm not sure it could, because I think you need that traditional underpinning knowledge. However, when I mentioned earlier about having a reading where somebody gave purely intuitive hits, and I was sitting there kind of feeling quite uncomfortable and squirming and trying to keep my lips shut because I didn't want to interrupt. The thing that she did do was give me a CD of that recording, and I found it in the car, and I was driving to it one day, and I've told this story before. I put it on, and I was amazed at how much in a 6-month period that she said would happen had come to fruition. So I can't say that a tarot reading based purely on influence can't be accurate, because in that case it was, and that was also using an RWS deck. So it might sound a bit of a paradox. For me personally, I think it's good to put the legwork in. It's good to study, and then add your influence on top of that, your intuition, I should say, on top of that.
All right, Simon, on that, just on intuition. And I have to agree with you on that. And this, Chris, this is where an experience I had would agree with what you have said, in the sense that I went for a reading in Dublin, and it was a woman literally in a back street in it was like a hole in the wall, and she was reading with playing cards, and she was literally, she had the cards and she was literally just pulling one card off at the time, and it was the King of Hearts and this, that and the other, and that's how she's reading, as quick as that. And she was just feeding me all this information, and I'm going like, and the next minute she did, it was the King of Hearts that she pulled. After about pulling out, she goes, "Your father's in spirit." I went, no, he isn't. So she says, he soon will be. And he passed away that year.
Wow.
Yeah. That was, we had booked a holiday, and we were all going on holiday, and he died 10 weeks later.
That goes back to the first question as well, doesn't it? About how truthful you should be in a reading. You know, that was very blunt.
Believe you me, this woman was as blunt as as a brick through a jeweler's window. You know.
And how was it you put it? Girl, you gon' die. That was good.
Okay. Simon, I remember that reading very well. Yeah. You've been around a while, Caroline. Okay, because of time, I'm going to skip question 3, because I also think that we've touched on it. And I did think when I was putting these together, actually, some of these might already answer themselves with early one. It was around tarot and free will, and whether you believe tarot reveals destiny or does it show possibilities. And I think we've covered that. And can tarot reading influence the choices we make or alter the outcomes? And I think we answered that in the first one. So I'm going to jump ahead to the morality of reading for others. And I know this is probably going to be quite a meaty subject as well, but is it ethical to read for someone who hasn't given explicit consent? And the reason why I put this one in, I saw the other day a reading about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And I've also seen, which I've been very uncomfortable in the past, about reading about missing people like Madeleine McCann and where she is and that sort of thing, and who's responsible. And it always, well, I won't reveal my thoughts. So is it ethical to read for someone who hasn't given explicit consent? Chris, do you want to kick off with that one?
Sure. I suppose I think it's quite difficult, to be honest with you. It's quite a difficult one to answer. I suppose no is the main answer to it, in my opinion. I do feel like when you're reading for people, it's only like, so if you were reading for me, like Sandy's such an integral part of my life that it would be really difficult to read for me and for him not to come into it in some way. I might ask you a question like I don't know how many times someone's, whether it's on a live or whether it's in person, asked me like about, you know, their other half or something like that, and I'm always quite like if it feels like I'm intruding on someone else's privacy, then I'm like, nah, I don't like that. Like, you know, some wee Jeannie across the road looks like she's up to something, going to have a wee look and see. I'm like, no, that's wee Jeannie across the road's business. But if it's like connecting to you, then I'll be like, right, okay, well, I can read for the connection between the two of you, because that's you, that's your stuff that I'm reading for. Other people might naturally come into that, and I'll be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a very natural part of not just tarot reading, but just reading people in general. But reading for people who it's got nothing to do with, I do feel uncomfortable about it. The example that you gave, Simon, I do still have like those readings that you're talking about. I see them all the time as well, and I do feel a wee bit uncomfortable about them too. I think when people are in the public eye, that puts a different slant on things. I'm not saying that makes it totally okay, but I do think like if someone's in the public eye, if you're like a celebrity or something, then I would quite happily sit here on this live and chat to you about I don't know, like, oh, did you hear that celebrity's going out with that person? Like, what did you think of that? Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't really think there's anything wrong with that. I might be a wee bit of a gab shite, but I don't think there's anything morally wrong with it. I wouldn't necessarily do the same thing if it was like, oh, did you hear about Becca, just to pick somebody who's not here? Like, oh, what did you think about that? Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, because Becca's not put her private business out in the public eye in the same way. And I think it's the same with doing readings and stuff. So is there anything morally wrong with doing readings on like Harry and Meghan? I'm not really sure. I still feel a wee bit uncomfortable about it, but I don't know that I think it's morally wrong for that reason.
Can I just go back to your first bit as well? So if you was given a reading for someone and they asked about a third person, do you think it's ever acceptable to refuse a question?
Oh yeah, I've got that in like before you even get a reading, you look at my thing and it says, I reserve the right to refuse any question that I'm not comfortable reading for. And that could be anything at all. I don't care if it's a perfectly reasonable question. If I don't want to read for it, I'm not going to read for it whatsoever. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your question or anything wrong with you. I'm just not the reader for you in that moment in time. So I think it's totally okay to refuse to answer a question, 100%.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so Robin, we're going clockwise. I lost the direction then.
Well, I think I tend to skirt the issue. I don't think there's any question probably that I won't answer, but I just rephrase it immediately. I mean, they know that I don't do predictive because I've already told them. And also I do guidance. Well, it's not going to help guide you if you're asking, does so-and-so love me? It will guide you in terms of your relationship to them, how you approach finding out. But it's not going to be in a prediction that I come up with through the cards. So that's not part of the equation for me. So I just reframe the whole thing into terms of trying to get at what it is they're trying to determine or figure out and how to help them find that answer on their own.
And similarly then, Robin, would you refuse a question, or is what you're saying you would just get them to rephrase it or look at it differently?
I wouldn't even ask them to rephrase it. I'd rephrase it for them.
Okay. Kelly?
Okay, yeah. So I've kind of done a bit of what Robin does, which is I have sometimes asked someone to reframe a question, or I've gone, okay, let's maybe just change that a little bit, and depending on the subject. When it comes to reading for people who are not there, who are not present, we are human beings, we are social creatures, and we have a long storied tradition of fortune tellers and cartomancers and diviners reading for those interpersonal relationships. So when someone says, oh, I don't read about a third party, it's become very common these days. And again, to sort of reclaim that sort of fortune telling tradition and reclaim that sort of those marginalized practices that were like crapped on by cis het white men in the 1800s, and we're trying to like poo-pooing sort of those marginalized practices. We're trying to sort of grab that back. Yeah, fuck it, I'll read for like if you think your partner's cheating on you, why not, honestly? Am I going to the ones about like people reading for missing persons cases and like murder cases give me the real ick. And this is someone who's listens to a lot of sort of true crime podcasts. I try to listen to like the more tactful ones, to be honest. And then I don't understand the celebrity ones. I've never really realized that was much of a thing. I guess it is. I will say I've talked about this before, for practice readings I use like a lot of fictional characters from films, TV shows, books, and that's my way. So if people want a way of like reading, I mean, if you're at home on your own and you're like, oh, I'm interested in reading about Meghan and what's his face called, Harry. Oh my god, you can tell I love the royal family. Who cares? Like, why not? You're just doing it for yourself. But if you're like putting it out in a newspaper, that's a bit weird. I don't know, why do people care? That's so strange. So it's a mixed bag for me. But yeah, I will totally read for like people who are not there. Okay.
Lovely. Elaine?
I have to agree with everything that's been said. Again, I think it all depends on your own moral values, to be quite honest. Personally, if somebody comes to me and they ask me a question about a third party, I will generally refuse to answer it unless they have the permission of the person that they're asking about, which they obviously won't have. However, there has been occasions where I've been reading for mums and they have kids going through their leaving cert, etc. And they say, can I just ask you a question? Can you just tell me, can you see, is my son or my daughter going to be okay in their exams? And I just say, do you know, actually, and I have to hold my hand up here. I've gone, yep, everything's looking fine. They're going to be grand. But the crux of the matter is, as long as they study, and I leave it at that, put the cards away, if they ask me personal questions about other people, it's an outright no. This reading for the likes of Meghan and Harry, now, that does stick in my craw, I have to be honest, because often when I have seen a couple of people doing this, and they probably, the things that are said about these two people would turn your stomach. Now, I will hold my hands up and say I am not a royalist, and I have no beef with any of them. Obviously, I don't have but I'm just not a royalist. At the same time, does not say that I would condone what's being done under the umbrella of tarot. I think it's crass. And underhanded and unpleasant. When it comes to looking for people who have been abducted, missing children, I think these people need to pull their head out their backside and get a life, quite frankly, because that's despicable. I know if it was one of my children and somebody was doing this online, I'd find out where they're doing and I'd pull their head off. It's as simple as that. I would not go, would not support it whatsoever. Sorry, I am very, very strong feelings on that.
I think I agree.
Sorry, Emmy the Grey made a good point earlier on in the chat, where she said it's okay if you're reading in private at home. It's when you take it that step further and put it out there for all and sundry to see your thoughts. And then I often think, when I've seen cards pulled and how a person is reading it about A, a missing person, B, Meghan and Harry, or any other royal or celebrity, and I'm looking, I thought, how the hell did you get that from that card? Which brings us back to how we read tarot. Because I'm looking at that card and I'm saying, I'm as sure as shit that card does not say that. It's that's it,
Yeah. No, my opinion on this is, when it comes to Harry and Meghan, I don't give a toss really, but and whether probably controversial, but I do sometimes think that a lot of these channels that do those type of readings want hits. It's very clickbaity, just like, walking into a newsagent's and seeing celebrities blasted all over the newsstands with salacious headlines. And I just kind of think, why give your energy to that? I agree with most people here who said, and in the chat, that doing readings on Meghan McCann and whether she's alive or dead is just a whole new level of despicable. And I am one of those people as well who has it on my website from when I had my tarot reading business, that I won't read for third parties, because but that's more for me, more because I like that intimate interaction with someone I'm reading for. So a bit like Robin was saying, it's more for, what are you wanting out of this reading? If you want to know if someone's going to come back to you, or do they have another person in their life, are they cheating? It's more about, what are you doing in your life to protect yourself, to perhaps look at why you might be in this relationship where you're constantly worrying if someone's going to leave you or not, etc. So it's more about the person you're with than for anybody else. Okay, we're already at 8 o'clock. We've done 3 questions.
Can I jump in a second? Because it just occurred to me that I have done third-party readings, and recently, I also host a seniors creative writing group. And one of the gals in there, I teach privately. I teach through Zoom how to read tarot. And we had a session recently. A lot of the time when we get together, there's a lot of gossip too. But we had a situation where somebody in the group was behaving a certain way that we didn't understand. So we gossiped a little about that. And I said, well, let's look at the cards. And actually, it was really good because we couldn't figure out what was causing her to behave the way she was. But the cards revealed to us a way to look at it from a different perspective and be more compassionate in understanding where she might come from. And it was something that we hadn't even considered. So, even though it was a third party thing and we didn't have her permission, it helped us to be more supportive of her by understanding her better. So in that instance, that's kind of very different than what you were talking about. But I think actually it was valid to do there because it helped us all work better together.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Okay, so moving on then. This is around tarot and shadow work. Now, you can be as honest and as you feel comfortable to be, really. But has tarot helped you confront uncomfortable truths about yourself? And the second part is, should tarot always be uplifting, or is it a tool for deep self-exploration, even when painful? And it might seem like the last one is pretty obvious, but I think there's people here that might have different takes on that. So, first point, has the tarot helped you confront truths about yourself? And I'm just going to throw that one open to whoever wants to answer that, because it can be quite a personal one.
Okay, I think in a sense, I find it has. I have been working on a tarot grimoire, and within that, I've done a lot of self-reflection and just why do certain things upset me? Why do I get angry or irked at the behaviour of, say, Joe Bloggs down the road? And unfortunately, I am I'm a calm, placid person to a point, but when it gets to that point, it's like I go off like a Polaris missile, and I have to say, why? What happened? What has gone on that made you react in such a manner? And there are parts to me that I have to be honest that I found I didn't like. And I think this came about for me a long time, well, I say a long time ago, I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago, after I'd recovered, when I was going through a big recovery after being so sick. And I had to look at life in a very different way. And that looking at life through a traumatic experience, a traumatic, illness that I'm lucky to actually be here, made me, I have used my cards for this, I've used meditation, but made me realize that life's too short. Life's too short, Elaine, for you to go off and potentially serve a prison sentence for some arsehole down the road. Do you know what I mean? So that's how I've had to sort of, and there's a society that didn't like me, that the dragon that literally I morphed into when somebody pressed that red button. And I thought, why do you get like that? My mum said, in fact, very recently, she said, I'm so glad you weren't born a boy. I said, why? She said, because as a man, she said, I think I'd have been visiting you in prison. And I said, am I really that bad? Jesus. But I think I've had not so many, so that's an exaggeration, but I've had a few explosive occasions throughout my life where to be quite honest with you, they need to be like that. It was my overreaction to something that could have been stamped out in a second, do you know? And it's that side of me that I have worked on. I have found since being sick, since devoting my time to me as a person, not Elaine the mother, Elaine the teacher, Elaine this, that, and the other, but to Elaine, finding peace in meditation, tarot, gardening, foraging, everything has made me a much nicer person. In fact, the more I avoid people, the nicer I am.
Brilliant. Thanks, Elaine.
Amazing.
Chris, do you want to answer that question?
I think I'll pass on that for now. You can come back to me
That's
if you
okay.
want, but I'll pass for now if that's okay.
No
Yeah,
worries.
I can say, I 100% it's helped me. Shadow work is a thing that I sort of dig into, or just sort of self-reflection, navel gazing, or whatever you want to call it. I found it immensely useful. Although ideally, sometimes being able to go through proper channels and get things like therapy would be great. That's not always an accessible option for people, but if you can get that, that's great. I've not always found it helpful, and sometimes there's things that you wouldn't necessarily go to therapy for. It's like smaller little things, I don't know, but yeah, like tarot it can be, I've spoken about this so many times, it can be used and worked with in so many different ways. It has so many applications, it's so capacious, and that's what's one of the wonderful things about it. But yeah, 100% it has helped me dig through those, like poked at those gnarlier, we can all be ourselves, like no one's perfect, definitely not me. And it's also helped me sort of realize that it's okay, that's okay. You know what I mean? We're all a sort of work in process. We're in a process of sort of learning to become better. That's what the saying, Maya Angelou, once we know better, we can do better. A part of that is knowing yourself and why you have certain things that come up for you. And tarot's a wonderful tool for that. I love me a tarot journal. I've got stacks of them. Yeah. And should it always be light uplifting?
Uplifting, or could it be a tool for deep exploration, even if painful?
So yes, because there have been times where I've been crying my eyes out over a tarot reading, and tarot can read you for filth. It will straight up cut a bitch, you know what I mean? Like, it can be really, and it depends on the deck that you're using. It depends on whether you're using a spread, what you're reading for, where your headspace is at. I don't think it always has to be uplifting. I think if you're reading for someone else, it helps if you can try to make it put the message across in a way that is tactful, like I said previously. And also, I really like trying to find, someone else has mentioned before, actionable steps and ways that people can work through a thing to try and find, not necessarily glossing on something, but trying to help someone through something that might be quite difficult. But also there's the other side to that if you are in a position where you're in a really bad headspace, and I've been in this position before where I've been in such a dark place that actually just even a regular tarot reading, I've got to, no, it can sometimes, the honesty of it, or the sort of what it can bring up, can be too much. I think there's also a responsibility to yourself to read when you know that you can handle it. And the same with someone else coming to you. If they seem incredibly vulnerable, or like there is stuff going on, I think it behooves you as a reader to be like, look, I really think that maybe you should seek out, because people talk about mistaking tarot for counselling, and it's not. A lot of people, there are people out there that can do counselling, like Kellyanne Maddox comes to mind. She's literally done courses in like psycho-spiritual counselling and other types of counselling, and I think that's where she combines them. I've got other friends who are psychotherapists and psychologists who incorporate tarot, and they know what they're like. A Polish folk witch, Tegan Cosmic Reaper Tube, being two people I can think off the top of my head, two friends that I have in this tarot tube land. And I think that also knowing when to be like, you know what, and then maybe doing a reading about what they can do right now instead, to like actionable steps to sort of help them through this very moment to get to the next step, to do the thing that they need to do to get that help, maybe. So,
yeah, lovely. So you jump in just before we get to Robin, because someone's asking about not really understanding what shadow work is, and in the context, and again, if I'm wrong, with how other people on the panel see it, but for me, we're talking about Carl Jung's interpretation of the shadow, which is an aspect of your personality or psyche that is ignored. He used the phrase ignored, but that lies perhaps dormant and not part of your consciousness. It's very much in your subconsciousness. And sometimes shadow work, if we do the work and we bring what's in the shadows to the surface, then we face them. It's almost like facing our demons. It's facing those things that we've perhaps put a lid on and pushed down as we've gone through life. That's my interpretation of it in this context.
Unfortunately, mine didn't lie dormant on occasion.
Robin, did you want to respond?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I'm not sure I know what shadow work is, but I don't use reversals, and I do think ultimately a reading should end up uplifting, but that's the goal. That sometimes you have to dredge the bottom to get to the uplifting part in order to accomplish it. And I think I'm mindful of two things. Joni Mitchell's song "Both Sides" now, because when I see the cards, I tend to look at various sides of the cards. I don't always look for what jumps right out at me. I'll look for the opposite of that, or what I'm overlooking, which makes me think of the Four of Cups card. It's like, oh, well, what am I missing here? What am I not paying attention to? Or what should I pay attention to that I'm just kind of looking at the Three Cups? There's a fourth cup I hadn't thought about. I need to think about that a little bit more and maybe feel about it a little bit more before I can get what I need to uplift me.
Yeah, brilliant. Long story short, just because of time, yes, I do think tarot has helped me confront truths about myself. I didn't in the early days, and I did a video on this in the first year of having a channel called Lifting the Lid on Pandora's Box. The tarot took me there without me wanting to go there. And I do think that the more you work with the tarot and the more you do readings for yourself, whether you want to do shadow work or not, eventually you will be confronted with some truths that you perhaps... And at the time I wasn't ready, and it took me by surprise. And then I got into the concept of reading about the shadow self and did some shadow work. So it's certainly helped me. And in answer to the second part, tarot can be uplifting, but sometimes it can be a journey to get to that point of it being uplifting. So I now, because I only read for other people, if they just ask me, would you mind giving me a reading? I'll do reading, but I don't do it professionally anymore. For me, it's a tool for self-exploration. And sometimes that is painful, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just about seeing things a little bit differently and having that guidance to navigate through a certain situation, or just an insight on the day. So, okay. Question 6, the evolution of tarot. Is tarot losing its historical roots with the rise of modern and themed decks? And I guess the second part, if there is a second part, is do you prefer traditional tarot with traditional symbolism, or do you embrace new interpretations? And I did a whole video live on this about one particular deck when the new Fool's Journey was released, which was a new concept of tarot. And there has been, Kelly, you did a live, I think the very first Tarot-thon, about making the case of Osho Zen as a tarot deck, because often people would say, well, it's not really a tarot, or we went through this with Dreams of Gaia. But the question, I guess, is tarot losing its historic roots with the rise of modern and themed decks?
Yeah.
Robin's putting his hand up. Do you want to go first, Robin?
Yeah, I think a lot of people start in tarot with key words, and actually when when I first picked up the RWS and saw the little white book, it put me off tarot for a decade or more. And it's because the key words in there some were synonyms, some were antonyms, some I didn't. How did they get that? It made no sense to me. And then I just looked at the imagery and found my way in. But I think there is a sort of a glossary of keywords or associations that we develop the more we work with tarot. And as oh my God, I can't see. I'm blanking out. Top, middle. Um, Elaine, Jesus. As Elaine said before, it needs to change with the times. But I'm finding with a lot of new decks, especially when Simon does these walkthroughs that have keywords on them, sometimes it's like, what? What the hell? I mean, I just don't get that connection with that image at all. And almost it's ever expanding glossary, but sometimes it seems to expand beyond my comprehension. And what it boils down to for me is I think we each need to develop our own glossaries that work for us. And we can find ways to verify if it's working or not working. But I think we need to I just push the others aside. If it's not a new keyword or new something I can relate to, or no, that doesn't work in the system that works for me, then I don't embrace it. I just, okay, I'll stay in my lane here. I know what I'm doing here.
Kelly?
As MA the Grey has said in the comment just a little further up, I like to mix. I like a mix of old and new. I keep it spicy. I mean, I think if a themed deck is done well, it's not a problem. I do think there's a lot of like mass market decks that are just throwing anything. Like there's a whatever. Think of a film, a theme, a TV show. There's probably a deck for it. And now, on saying that, I do have some theme decks because there are themes that I like. Some of them are more successful than others. The Tarot del Toro, with artwork by Thomas Hijo, is wonderful. Reads like a dream. I got the Dark Crystal Tarot with the same artist, same publisher. Completely different vibe. I don't know if it's successful as a tarot, and I find it so interesting that whole argument about the Osho Zen that went around about it not being a tarot, because if you sit down and look at it, it's so clearly based in the Smith-Waite structure. Like the Fool literally is a guy leaning off of the edge of a cliff holding a white rose in like Harlequin. And yeah, there's deviations from that, but I think the deviations can keep things interesting if you already know what the meanings are, going back to that other question. So say, for example, the Sasarai Bito or the Next World Tarot, they're like pushing boundaries, especially the Next World. It's literally a sort of it's classed as a radical deck. It's doing some really interesting things, but it's still based within a structure. It's updating it for today and also looking forward to what futures could be possible, what we can build together, whilst remaining within that structure. And then of course there are decks that are argued that are not tarot, like you said, the Dreams of Gaia, for example, I would maybe argue is an interesting one. I don't own that deck, so I can't comment too strongly on it. The Chrysalis Tarot is someone I've seen, an old school reader, what's her name, Christina Gaudet. I remember her saying on her channel about 10 years ago, she was ranting that it wasn't a tarot deck. You get decks that have extra suits. It's a real mixed bag. And then as someone who reads Marseille a lot, I'm massively in love with Charlie Claire Burgess's queer Gay Marseille. It's so rooted in, the guidebook makes that very clear, the numerology and the symbolism and the color and the suits and elements of like the things that you would see Yoav Bendov talking about, and like Camellia Elias and Eliphaz Levi. But then you've also got that sort of freestyle stuff going on in the guidebook. It knows its roots. They've created that deck knowing enough about it to then deviate. It's like, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's that old saying, you need to know the rules before you can break them. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me.
Oh. Elaine?
I have to be honest, I am I like to see new decks. I like to see new creators. I like to see what they're producing. I also like when you get a good book with it, and like you say, Kelly, rightly so, when they've referred to, the origins of tarot, they can show that there's a link. It doesn't have to be verbatim of what's gone in the past. You just have to look and say, I love to read a creator's interpretation of their own deck. After I have gone through the cards myself and seen what I've got from the cards. I like to compare what I pick up from the cards, and this is going to intuitive, based my intuitive reading along with my understanding of the historical meaning of each card, and then take the reads. Now, I don't do that with every deck, otherwise I'd be sitting with decks piled around my head, and I'd be there till probably the day I die and beyond, trying to get through every deck. But when a deck interests me to that level, I will take a couple of cards, just a couple of cards, look at them, see what I'm getting from it, historically and intuitively, and then compare it to what the creator has given us from their point of view, how they've interpreted their own deck, and I just find that quite often there's a parallel. Quite often you can pick out, well, we actually have it, their intuition, that they've obviously used history, they've obviously looked at come from a platform. Then again, you do get the odd deck where you look at it and you think, I don't know how they've got that. Now, I do have a deck that has done that, and I actually have an aversion to the actual book. I can't read the book on it because I've picked out that many errors and picked out so many things where I can't understand how they've got their interpretation. That it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful deck, but the book I just can't link the two together. It's like a different deck to book when you look at the interpretation of each card, and that's when it throws me. And I think, are we going down? It's now a case of there's that many people producing decks. Are we losing that original historical value of the cards? Do you know what I mean? It's almost, are we now? Sometimes this particular deck is like, did aliens write this? Because I haven't a bogger's notion what they're actually talking about there, because the two don't gel. So I have come across that, but I do think that seeing new creators, seeing new decks, looking what they've got, and then you can sort of go, nice, 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 nice. It's very rare I will find a deck that I can't gel with. Very rarely I'll give a negative reading on a deck. But I wouldn't say that I gave a negative reading, but I did pick out that I couldn't find the link between the card and the interpretation of the creator. It just annoys me a little bit.
Thanks, Elaine. Chris?
Simon, would you mind asking the question again, so I know I've got it right in my head?
Yeah.
Long since I started.
No, that's fine. So it's about, is tarot losing its historical roots with the rise of modern and themed decks, and whether you then prefer traditional tarot with traditional symbolism?
Got you. Thank you. I really don't think it is. I think with tarot, the more the merrier. Now, don't get me wrong, there are lots and lots of decks out there that I personally don't like, that I personally think are dog shit, that I personally think someone's just done that as a money-making thing. Simon, how many times have we talked about my feelings on these semi-pip things? That really grinds my gears. But for each and every single one of those decks that I think are shite, that'll be their deck that just really connects them to tarot. So I think that, welcome to them all. Do you know what I mean? I'm never going to turn around and say, no, that never should have been made. That's just was a mistake. And I don't. So from that point of view, I don't think that anything is contributing to tarot losing its historic roots or anything like that. And it's interesting, do I prefer traditional or do I prefer more modern? A mixture of both. What I would say is, like, most if not all of the decks that I have, that I've seen, that I've picked up, that I've taken the time to look into, has taught me something. It might just be like one particular card that really kind of deepened my meaning for connection to, but I feel like everything can teach me something. But in terms of my own preference, it's a bit of a range all over. I like some of the modern stuff, and I like some of the more traditional stuff too.
Brilliant. You can see why I asked these questions, can't you? Because all these questions are where I've always had sort of dilemmas, and getting your viewpoints is just brilliant. And I can see from the comments how much people are enjoying this discussion as well. So for me, somebody who's got nearly 1,000 decks, what I will say is, I agree with what's been said so far. You know, a deck may come in. So I've had one this week. I even put in the description yesterday, this deck is out there. It's around aliens and starseeds, and but the comments on that deck is, because it was the first showing of it, it's not out yet. People were like, I can't wait for this, love this, and the artwork is beautiful. But what I will say is that with someone with lots of decks, and in a fortunate position as well, where people send them to me for review, I would admire them, usually first for their artwork, secondly for how much they kind of align to perhaps an RWS system, because most of the ones I do get are part of the tradition of RWS. But I find that I tend to go back to reading the RWS, because that's and I love them, and I've got them on the shelves, and I'll pull them from time to time. But if I'm doing readings for myself, then I go back to what I know, my soul deck. The rest is lovely to have. So I'm in a dilemma, because I do think as well that one of those decks will be someone's gateway into tarot.
Yes.
And just because it doesn't speak to me, somebody could walk into a bookshop and think, who's looking into the whole starseed thing, and think, oh, there's a tarot on that, I'll buy that. And or lots of these pop culture ones where there's films like Ghostbusters Tarot or Golden Girls Tarot. They might be collectors of certain genres of films or programs, retro programs, and get it because they're into Buffy, and then suddenly they've got that step into tarot. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, Kelly. So it's there's something for everyone, and again, that's what's beautiful about tarot. We've got time for one last question, so I'm just going to see which one I want to ask. I think let's end a little bit light-heartedly, because there's a couple of quite deep ones there around religion and spirituality, which we'll pause for now. Personal connection to tarot decks, then. Do you believe certain decks choose their readers? And have you ever felt a disconnect from a deck that others love?
Yes.
Who wants to take that one first?
I can go first. I'm actually chuckling away because I was playing one of the Star Wars games earlier on, Jedi Fallen Order, and I'm away, my lightsaber's broken, I'm away looking for my kyber crystal, and it's like the crystal chooses the Jedi doesn't choose the crystal. So that's just what popped into my mind there when you said that. I don't know if I believe that the tarot deck chooses the person, because I'm kind of the tarot's a tool. I don't really know if I believe that it can think and breathe and choose someone for itself, not in the literal sense anyway. I know that it might feel like that, and I've certainly, I know there's lots and lots of people that say, I didn't find the tarot found me, and I'm not saying that that's not valid. Rachel Pollock says that, so if Rachel says it, then it must be right. What was the other thing you asked? I've definitely found myself disconnecting with decks that other people love 100%. But like you say, I think that goes back to what we were saying before. It's all part of the fact that, you know, tarot's this subjective thing. It's like there's something there for everyone, and I think that, well, I'm glad I'm not into everything, because if I was, then my wee brain would explode.
Yeah, don't read that comment below, Chris.
Oh, there's something about the lights here.
Do you want to say, just for the heck of it, a deck that you have a disconnect with that others love, or would you rather not?
I know, I don't mind saying it, but come back to me, let me think about it. Because the wee bullshit, the wee shite in me wants to say something like the RWS just to annoy you, but obviously you know that I like the
RWS.
Fine. No, come back to me and I'll think of one.
All right, yeah, Robin.
Oh, I hardly know what to say here. I think, well, you know, when we go shopping in a metaphysical shop and we're drawn to a deck, it's like the deck is beckoning us. You know, it's not like we go looking for the deck, knowing what's there. So it's in that sense, it feels to me almost like the deck chooses us. But it has to do with our own likes and dislikes and notions. I guess. I was just not to out Elaine, but what a deck she couldn't stand and reviewed very badly is my favorite deck. So there you go. You know.
I know which one that is. Do you know, Elaine? The manuscripts of initiation.
Yes, there was. Wasn't the Hush? Yeah.
No, the manuscripts of initiation.
I don't remember that one. Oh, Jesus Christ!
It was the one that had the really tiny medieval scripts on it from Ukraine.
Oh, Mother of Divine God! Yes, I gifted that. Yes, the other. Yeah, I have to. Oh God, yeah, allergy to that.
Robin gifted it to me as well in New York.
You know, though, what I was thinking earlier when you were talking about this, in terms of the what's happening with decks and they're expanding. When I look at a deck, if I think about looking at the description and removing the image, think about approaching a deck that way. How much of it is in the image for you, or how much does that mean, or how much does that change things? For me, I think it's more disturbing in a way when they change the elements or the names of things that don't fit the old system. That kind of drives me crazy. So anyway, I'll pass on.
And do you have a deck that you have a disconnect from, Robin, that everybody else seems to love?
About 80% of the ones that
I
you
was going to say that's a bit of a mute point, really. Kelly?
Yeah, first of all, I'll just say it's funny that you mentioned the thing about the elements being swapped or titles being sort of changed around, because I've literally listened to a podcast that's had me thinking about that whole elemental swords and wands situation. So I might be doing a video about that. I'd never considered, does the deck choose you? I've never ever thought about that. My first deck, the Osho said, I definitely chose it off of like looking through the limited number that were available. I talk about this about the video that's going up tomorrow, the VR I've done to you, Simon, and I was like, it's the prettiest one. It's pretty. I was 16, so you know, I chose that. On saying that, going back to the same shop about 15-20 years later, to buy a deck, and I talk about it in the video that's going up tomorrow. I feel like it could only have chosen me, because I would never pick it. And if I say visual vomit, you'll probably know what I'm talking about, Simon, because you literally tagged me in a post on Facebook about it beforehand. Yeah. The Tarot Illuminati. What the hell is that deck? It's kind of fugly. It's a lot, you know, and yet reads like a dream. It was calling me. I could hear it like in my dreams. Come and get me. Come and get me. Love it. Weird. Like love it, but hate it, but love it. And then disconnect, like so many. There are so many decks that people like will rave about, you know, when they have their moment and it's like the deck at the moment. And I'm just like, But it's all like different strokes for different folks, you know. And I will happily say, like, one that's never called to me that people absolutely lost their minds about is the light seers. Does absolutely nothing for me. Nothing.
Yeah.
I do quite
Fair
like
enough.
the look of the muses one though. So
Oh, do you?
yeah, I think
More
it's very
you like
pretty.
the more collage
Yeah,
aspect? Yeah.
and the colours, a lot of pink in. I don't know, I like pink. I don't know. So yeah, just
Yeah.
you never know.
Lovely. Elaine?
Yes, I have. I personally don't think that a deck calls a person. That's just my take. If I see a deck I like it, I'll collect it. However, the one I did have an ick deck besides the one that we were talking about just now. I can't even remember the name of it. In fact, Anne was on just a second ago saying it was Anne that got that deck. I gave that to Anne because I couldn't cope with it. But one that I really, really could not take to, and it was the Hush Tarot. It just did nothing for me. In fact, it gave me the heebie-jeebies, to be quite honest with you. There's just something about it I didn't like. So I did that as a giveaway on my channel. So I think that's actually made its way to the USA somewhere, actually. But yes, it's no. I think a person chooses the deck. I do think you can get a vibe off a deck, but I don't necessarily think that it chooses the person. I think if you have an interest in the topic of the deck, it will attract you because it's something that you have an interest in. But I don't think it actually calls you per se. I think it's just, if you have a leaning towards whatever the topic of that deck is. Yeah.
Interestingly, the Hush Tarot I ended up buying again because I couldn't connect with it, and I gave it away.
Yeah.
When we used to do the Tarot Times, I gave it away.
Giving it away there. Tarot Times,
and
yeah.
then I kept seeing people do doing readings with it, and I was like, oh. And then I went into a shop in Chesterfield, and it was there, and I thought, I'm going to give you another go.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I bought it back. But I did that with Mary L. It took me a long time with Mary L. But
I actually picked up the one JJ Swiss the other day.
Did you?
Yeah, in Westport. It was lovely.
My first ever deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you say, Elaine, sorry, whether you've ever felt a disconnect to a popular deck that everybody loves
There was the Hush Tarot.
the Hush, just the Hush. Yeah.
Now, when I've just actually said tarot doesn't call to people, that I might have to actually eat my words there a tad bit, because I cannot go anywhere without this old gem.
Yeah, I see that a lot on your social medias.
Travels with me everywhere I go. This is the
Robin
deck.
loves that as well.
I absolutely love this deck. This was my first make playing cards deck as well. That was 2018, and it's a workhorse. It's an absolute workhorse. I love it. I absolutely love it. So so that's it.
Chris, did you think of a deck?
Yeah, so a couple of examples. I wouldn't say these particularly give me the ick, but so I've never really felt much of a connection to any Robert M. Place decks. I know lots of people really rave about his decks. I've just never felt drawn to them. And the other one is the Crow Tarot, the Cullinan Crow Tarot. There's one card in it, the Four of Pentacles. It looks like the crow has boobies, like pentacle boobies, and it puts me off. I can't unsee it. It's like a Madonna kind of a bra type thing, the way the pentacles are on it, and it's just something that's always caught my eye. I know that I wouldn't be able to read for that with that deck because it would distract me anytime that card came up. So I suppose that's kind of an ick, a wee bit. But I know that lots of people love it.
I love how you always see things that are really inappropriate in decks. There's so many decks that we spoke about where you're like, do you not see this? I'm thinking of like Tower of the Abyss, and I'm thinking of Shimmering Veil.
Yeah.
And then now you've said it, it's always there when I pull those cards. Do I believe that decks can call me? Yes. There's been times where I thought, no, I'm not getting that. Particularly if they become popular and I'm not really in on the act, and I think, well, I don't really see what all the fuss is about, but then it will call me later and end up, getting it in the end because I get that pull to keep going back and keep looking and keep watching walkthroughs. And then disconnect from a deck that others love. I just have to go back to the Fountain Tarot. Everybody was going on about the Fountain Tarot about 8 years ago. It was the best thing ever, and I got it, and I just, that and Thoth. But everybody knows my thoughts on Thoth. I love the system. I say love the system. I don't mind the system because I've got lots of decks like the Guild Tarot, Urban Tarot, but it's just the original Thoth deck. Those images just don't do anything for me, but other people love them. So, wow, we've been on an hour and 40 minutes. We didn't get through all the questions, but I think the ones we have covered were quite juicy and meaty. I really appreciate hearing all your views. As I said, the reason why I put these questions in was because I feel conflicted by a lot of them, and getting people from within the online tarot community with, and I mean this in the nicest way to each and every one of you, but very strong opinions about things, because each of you do, you won't hold back. You will say what you think, and that's what I wanted in particular for that. So thank you for your honesty. Thank you for agreeing to come and be part of tonight's discussion. Thank you to the 133 people that are here and joining in with the conversation. I know I've not kept on top of it, but it's really hard when you're so engrossed in what people are saying and you're trying to get everybody else's opinions. But hopefully, as well as listening to all of us as a panel, you've been able to interact with each other in the chat. And it's scrolling that fast now, I can't even focus on it. But yes, thank you, everyone. Is there anybody here who wants to promote something you've got coming up, or you want to highlight something? Shout out now before we say goodbye.
You can find me here on YouTube under Kelly Bear. I have a shop where I make tarot pouches and other witchy bits and bobs.
Fabulous products.
Kelly Bear Art on Etsy.
Yeah, and you do a weekly live, don't you, Kelly? More or less.
Not a weekly live. I do the odd live. I wouldn't say a weekly. The odd.
Not a weekly drop, I should say.
Weekly. Oh, not a weekly drop. No, goodness. I wish I could say that fast. No.
No. On your videos, you drop a
video every week. I thought you meant for pouches. No, yeah, I try to upload every Sunday around 5 p.m. UK time. Okay, yeah, sorry, I wasn't confused.
No, that's fine. Yeah, anybody else got anything coming up or anything you want to promote?
Oh, and no shipping to Ireland. Sorry, they've changed the rules. So there's no EU, no Ireland, no Northern Ireland shipping, unfortunately, anymore. They've put a thing on that. We're waiting to see what will happen. It might change. I don't know.
It's madness.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for being here. If you guys stay on, I'll just say goodbye to you all at the end. So take care. See you in the week.
Bye, everyone.